Greetings and salutations, everybody. I just want to do a quick little intro here for this latest supercut for this Halloween season, which is for Dracula. More specifically, the Hammer Films entries in the Dracula franchise, which span 10 films from 1958 to 1974, which include The Horror of Dracula from 1958, The Brides of Dracula from 1960, Dracula Prince of Darkness from 1966, Dracula's Risen from the Grave from 1968, Taste of Blood of Dracula from 1970, Scars of Dracula also from 1970, Countess Dracula from 1971, Dracula A.D. 1972 from 1972, The Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973, and The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires from 1974, which I believe is the only one of these that they had the Dracula character in, which did not have Christopher Lee taking on the role, but it was a joint project with Hammer and the Shaw Brothers, so we get a lot of really cool kung fu action, which definitely made that one worth checking out. Anyways, these were originally published on my channel about 2 years ago over the course of several months, so you may have missed them if you are new here, if you're one of the new subscribers. There's also one which is out of order, which is for the Countess Dracula, which I tacked on at the end with the wrap-up for this whole set. Because I kind of messed up back then. Somehow I missed that entry in it and I had to go back and check it out. I will have chapters in the description if you want to skip around, or you can just run the whole thing through. Something to have on in the background while getting stuff done around the house and wanting some quick info on these films while keeping that whole spooky feel of the season around. Some of these are, I definitely enjoyed them quite a bit, some not so much. But as usual, if you enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up, and if not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that bell to get notifications when I put up new content, which is 1 to 3 times a week, and I will see you in the next one. Here comes Dracula. Greetings and salutations, everyone. I'm back with some more Hammer here. I know one would think that I would need a break after 20 films in 20 weeks, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my back catalog. As for a little more of where this video is going, if you're new here, I make these little videos about things that I enjoy, usually about films and occasionally other stuff that I just want to share. And, if you like what you see or if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so that way you get a notification when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, with the occasional extra one thrown in. But yeah, be sure to check out the back catalog and share both this video and channel around, as it really does help a lot. But now that that's all out of the way, so I went through that 20 film set of Hammer films, which was a lot. There were a lot in here, and it was pretty decent. A little bit of a spoiler alert here was that my little wrap-up video that I have at the end of the series did express they had a little bit of disappointment. The only one was really just that this cover, Hammer Films, it looks very horrific. It even says things about how we dare you to watch, but they were not all horror. In fact, some of them were comedies, some of them were war dramas. They were still good, but I just really felt like, I wanted to get more throwback horror, and I wanted to get my hands on more Hammer horror films, which I did, especially some of these Christopher Lee Dracula ones that I've been wanting to watch. I've been wanting specifically to revisit what little sliver of memories I have from seeing bits and pieces of those films growing up as a kid. So I've got several, and I just checked out the first one, which is titled Horror of Dracula from 1958. And the synopsis for this film is, it's Dracula. And by that I mean, it's Dracula? So anyways, the official synopsis is, Jonathan Harker rouses the ire of Count Dracula after he accepts a job at the vampire's castle under false pretenses. Harker's friend, Dr. Van Helsing, then embarks on a hunt for the predatory villain when he targets Harker's loved ones. If it sounds different, well, it really is, Not just from the Lugosi film, but from the original book. It definitely strays quite a bit. And, I actually have, here we go. Little classics here. A lot of dust on there. It isn't just Dracula, the Frankenstein part of this book as well. I've seen it with the, the Wizard of Oz stuff. That film really deviates from it quite a bit. So all this stuff from Grimm's Fairy Tales. All these are dusty. I need to read more. And Necronomicon, any of the H.P. Lovecraft stuff. A lot of these works over the years have kind of been adjusted and changed to try to fit them into a film or try to make something that works better as a film, since they enjoyed how it was written. But even though this film really strayed a lot from both the original book and any previous Dracula interpretations that there have been, I just had to kind of get over all that and just settle back and think, this isn't Dracula the book. This isn't the Dracula of Lugosi. This is a film with Dracula, heavily inspired by the book by Bram Stoker. And with that in mind, I actually really did enjoy this one a lot and feel that people should check it out. I had a lot of what I've mentioned in many of my previous Hammer reviews, about the way that color was used, the running time, seeing how some of these actors were, such as Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, much earlier in their careers. And this one in particular also had Michael Gough in it, I believe is how you say his name, of Batman fame, where he played Alfred, as well as more recently, not that recent, but more recently in his career, he was in Sleepy Hollow and did some voices in Corpse Bride. But this one also had Jeanine Fay in it, this little girl at the time who was in Never Take Candy from a Stranger, a Hammer film which I did a review for and really stuck with me quite a bit, is one of my favorites in that set. But, keeping a different mindset about where these films are coming from going forward, this really has me excited to check out the rest of what's kind of in this catalog of Dracula-based films from Hammer, which, if my list is correct, consist of, so we've got Dracula from 1958, otherwise known as the, what's this one called? The Horror of Dracula. But we also had 1960, The Brides of Dracula, 1966, Dracula, Prince of Darkness, 1968, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, in 1970 there was Taste the Blood of Dracula, as well as Scars of Dracula. 1972 we had Dracula A.D. 1972. 1973 we had The Satanic Rites of Dracula, and in 1974, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. So I won't be doing a video on each and every one of those individually. I think that would take too long. That gives quite a lot to look through, but I think after I'm done, what I'm going to do is either do a single video for 2 or 3 of those films to kind of talk about them, or one that's just got all of them in it. They spend about 1 or 2 minutes on each one talking about the pros and cons of them, how I enjoyed it and everything. With the goal being that each, that video will be a relatively short, maybe 15 to 20 minute video about that series in general. But, so if you're curious about where those goes, be sure to subscribe and everything. And in a few weeks, I'll be doing a follow-up video to this one once I've caught up on those Dracula films. It may take me a few weeks to get around to them because I have a lot of things in my back catalog myself that I've been wanting to watch. So a lot of new stuff coming out all the time as well. But in the meantime, of course, there'll be some other content on this channel that I'll be putting up, such as the usual 80s retro reviews for various genres, any new horror films that hit services like Netflix or especially Shudder, additional horror classic one-offs, whether it's some of the older Universal stuff that I still have to go through some items in that list, or some other stuff from Hammer that's not Dracula-based, as well as just stuff that's a classic from my generation, stuff that I grew up in the 70s and 80s watching, and of course the occasional new film that really got me excited. Earlier this year I did one for the Batman and one for Everything Everywhere All at Once, so be sure to check those out as well. But anyways, thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you'll listen to all that YouTube stuff that I said at the beginning about subscribing and all that, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back. I'm back with another video here for some of the older horror films that I've been going through by Hammer Films. But for those who are new, I like to make these little videos about things that I like and like to share, such as films mainly, but not exclusively, occasionally a game or some arts and crafts, or even some books, which I did in my previous review. And if you're new here comes all that YouTube stuff. If you like this content, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, as well as hitting that bell icon so you'll get notifications when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though I do try to work in some additional stuff as I can if I come across it. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video and share both this video and channel around, as it really does help the channel quite a bit. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, so as I said on my previous video, which I will link to any of the ones that I reference in my description here, I've been working my way through all those Hammer horror films, and the box set that I bought turned out to have not just horror, but some comedy and thrillers and action adventure as well. So I was able to track down some of what I was a bit more interested in initially, which were the horror films. Got my hands on some copies of all the old Hammer Dracula films from the 50s and 60s, and I've been slowly making my way through them. So I went through the first one for Dracula with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Enjoyed it. It's a pretty nice film. So now I've got 2 more in the series that I wanted to have a very quick word about. The first one is for The Brides of Dracula from 1960. This one does not have, it doesn't have Christopher Lee in it because Dracula's dead by this point. So it's a bit of a different film, but the official synopsis is: vampire hunter Van Helsing returns to Transylvania to destroy handsome bloodsucker Baron Meinster, who has designs on beautiful young schoolteacher Marianne. Yeah, so I made it through the film. It was all right. There wasn't really a whole lot to say about it. You know, I kind of feel like after the first Dracula film that they did, this one was kind of just filling in some gaps or trying to, I guess, kind of capitalize on it, and it didn't really pull me in that much. But of course, it was really cool seeing another, film with Peter Cushing and getting to, enjoy some more of his earlier work. So just for that alone, it was definitely worth checking out. Plus, a lot of these older films, just the whole way that they wrote them, I really enjoyed. And, this one was okay, though ultimately I would say it was skippable. But then today, finally got around to watching another one from the list, which is for Dracula, Prince of Darkness from 1966. Now, Peter Cushing isn't in this one, but Christopher Lee does come back to reprise his role as Dracula. The synopsis for this one, which is very short, simply states, Dracula is resurrected, preying on 4 unsuspecting visitors to his castle. So, some of the things that I really liked about what they did with this film was we get back into this idea that I always find most important in horror, is this sense of being trapped. So, we have these visitors who are kind of stranded in this area and come across Dracula's castle. They've had all the warnings from like townspeople and everything, and it's, again, it's an all right entry. It was strange that they waited so long between one film and the other to create this one. And unfortunately, it doesn't have Peter Cushing in it. But, overall, it was really interesting. One of the scenes that sticks out the most is actually resurrecting Dracula. It kind of reminds me of a scene from Hellraiser where Frank is resurrected by some blood spilling on the floor and kind of, reconstitutes himself in a way. Though it wasn't as gross as that. This one being from 66. So this one, it's literally blood being poured into this coffin, kind of like a sacrifice, and then Dracula slowly coming back. Cool way that they did it was for most of it, it looks like one shot. They do have a lot of smoke and other things coming in to kind of disguise when they're switching out different parts of the effect, any kind of stop motion stuff they might be working in there. So it worked. The scene was a little bit long to show him coming back, but it worked out very smoothly, and I'm sure, especially at the time, people hadn't really seen this kind of effect done. Unlike lots of the other movies, I really enjoyed how it was filmed, how they used color, and I really feel like coming off of The Brides of Dracula that I wasn't that impressed with and feel like it's very skippable. This one, I enjoyed it enough to feel like I'm a little bit more excited about checking out the rest of the Dracula films in the series. And of course, after that, there'll be the Frankenstein films as well. I got several of them to check out. So, just wanted to do a very quick video about those two things. Brides of Dracula from 1960, it was so-so, though ultimately skippable. And Dracula, Prince of Darkness from 1966, which was much more enjoyable and feels kind of like it's getting back to its roots of what Dracula is, and it has me excited about seeing the other films. So if you have access to this one, I definitely say to check it out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little video about those two films. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, follow all that YouTube stuff where I mentioned giving it a thumbs up, subscribing, sharing. It really does help out the channel quite a bit. I'm still trying to build my subscriber base so I have a larger audience to create these little videos for. Anyways, that's all I have for this quick and very dark, as far as the light goes, kind of video. And I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everyone. I am back with another video. And for those who are new, I like to make these little videos about things that I enjoy, usually about film, but not exclusively, just things that I like to share. And while you're here, if you like this video, please be sure to hit that little subscribe button and give it a thumbs up maybe as well. Even hit that little bell icon so you get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though every now and then I like to work in an extra one. While you're here, also check out my back catalogs if there's something that you like, and consider sharing both this channel and this video around, as it really does help quite a bit. Well, now that that's all out of the way, I've been continuing my journey through these Hammer Dracula films of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and this video is for a single title in that line, which is for Dracula Has Risen from the Grave from 1968, starring Christopher Lee, of course. No Van Helsing in this one though, so we get no Cushing. However, it was still an enjoyable film. But as far as what this installment is about, the synopsis for this one is as follows. When Castle Dracula is exorcised by the Monsignor, it accidentally brings the Count back from the dead. Dracula follows the Monsignor back to his hometown, preying on the holy man's beautiful niece and her friends. So it took me a minute to kind of understand what was going on in this one. I had to kind of remember the ending of the last one. So I knew that he was brought back in the last one, but I'd actually forgotten how it ended, how he was kind of defeated in that. And I was wondering where this synopsis was coming from. You know, how were they bringing him back again? But then I had to remember that at the end of the last film, spoiler alert here, he's kind of taken care of by falling beneath the ice, kind of entombed in frozen water, otherwise known as ice. Anyways, so he's just kind of been stuck there. And as far as this storyline goes, it's been about a year. So the Monsignor heads to this castle to perform an exorcism on it, get rid of any, lingering spirits that may be there, and to try to get rid of some of the fear that these townspeople were still having a year after Dracula was defeated. Trying to find a way to get everybody just involved again and going back to church, saving their souls and so forth. But during this, Dracula is accidentally resurrected due to a situation where, the ice kind of crumbles, some blood gets in there, he's resurrected, and now he's back again. So overall, this is a pretty decent film. I mean, Christopher Lee, of course, was, menacing as usual. And it's really strange looking at things. One of the things I noticed was that, just like in the previous films, his eyes being very bloodshot, and I just kind of worry what they had to do back then to get that effect, because I don't know if they had those kinds of contacts. I always wonder if they're doing something crazy like putting mercury in their eyes or asbestos in their veins or something, not knowing what kind of problem it's going to cause. But anyways, he definitely comes across as very menacing, gross, scary, very powerful performance, but also while it does take a little while to get from that point of him being resurrected to then getting to the town, they do have a lot of really decent chemistry between some of the performers and the storyline that they wrote them into, try to keep you interested in what's actually happening in that town with some of our lead characters. So it does lull a little bit throughout that point, but I think that this is mainly because, now that I'm more familiar with this incarnation of Dracula and Christopher Lee's performance and becoming a fan of it, I'm going into these now with this mindset of just show me more Count Dracula already. It's like once you've seen that, you just kind of want more of it. So it's a little bit harder to get through those lulls in the story where they're trying to get you more connected to some of the characters who are not then going to have to deal with the Dracula situation. But if I put that impatience aside and just take it for what it is, I will also say that this one is definitely one of the most gory of the films. I mean, not gory by today's standards. Network television definitely goes above and beyond. But by comparison to the other Hammer films I'd seen up until this point, this one's definitely the goriest of them. Mainly just in, somebody getting staked and really seeing a lot of the blood. In the past, they wouldn't have shown that much detail. But they also added, unless this was in the previous films that maybe I just simply forgot or they didn't stick out, this need for actually having a prayer when you kill Dracula. So if you stake him or do something else, there also needs to be a prayer to kind of sanctify that situation so he can't rise from the grave again. But overall, this is a pretty fun installment in the series, and it's got me to this point now where I just want to see the next one. I want to see how are they going to bring him back in the next one, because I got a few more after this one, and I've really been enjoying them, and it's also getting me more excited about when I start diving into more of the Frankenstein films that they have as well. But anyways, a decent one. The next one in the series, I believe, is Taste the Blood of Dracula from 1970. So it'll be interesting to see how they bring him back in that one and how they deal with that situation, what that overall story's like. But anyways, that's about it. Thanks for checking out this little video, quick recommendation for this movie. And while you're here, be sure to hit that subscribe, the bell icon, and all that fun stuff to get notifications for when I put Taste the Blood of Dracula up, which will be in a couple of weeks, and as well as the others in the series. Both Dracula related, as well as the other Hammer films that I have on my slate going forward, and I think I'm up to 24 of them that I've done previously, which I can't believe I've done 24 of these videos related specifically to Hammer films since the beginning of the year. Anyways, with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope if you decide to check out, Dracula Has Risen from the Grave from 1968, that you enjoy it, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another video. If you're new, I like to make these little videos about things that I enjoy and I want to share, typically about film, but not exclusively. While you're here, if you enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon down in the corner so you get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though occasionally I'll throw in a third. If you enjoy this, go ahead and check out my back catalog as well. You may find a few other videos that you enjoy. And be sure to share both this video and this channel around, as it really does help out the channel quite a bit. Well, now that that's out of the way, I've been working my way through a couple different franchises. And about 8 months ago, I started going through some of the Hammer films. And now I'm up to the point where I've been checking out these Hammer Dracula films starring Christopher Lee. So I've been enjoying them overall for the most part. It's been interesting to kind of see where a lot of this history had kind of begun with him becoming so popular for playing the Dracula role. So tonight I watched the latest entry for me, which was Taste the Blood of Dracula from 1970. So in this one, where we left off last time, Dracula had been staked and died, and I was interested to see how they're going to bring him back. So the way that they brought him back in this one is a character played by Roy Kinnear, who happens to be the father of Rory Kinnear, who's from Penny Dreadful and Black Mirror, as well as many other things as well. He comes across Dracula as he's dying and somehow gets his blood, which had turned into dust, his cloak, like a medallion of his, and his signet ring. And then it kind of flashes forward a little bit into the town, where basically we have this interesting situation where there are these elite men, kind of like these rich guys, kind of bored with life. They're spending their time at this brothel and everything, and they come across a man who they're kind of confronting to the fact that they heard he was into like black magic or something along those lines. He had been disowned for attending a black mass. So this man offers them a proposition that he can give them something better in life since they are getting bored with whatever. So he has them kind of interested in possibly selling their soul to the devil and doing this little ritual and everything. Part of this was him getting those Dracula-related items from Roy Kinnear's character and then doing this big ceremony to sell their souls to the devil. So during this, he ends up drinking the blood of Dracula and dies, and the rich men kind of freak out and go their separate ways. But this reincarnates Dracula. And now Dracula's on the loose, but he sees that his, kind of like his servant, the one who was arranging this whole black mass at this old church that was converted into like a satanic temple, he sees that he died, and he holds these men responsible and decides to basically get revenge on them. So he's going after them through their daughters and other family members to kind of enchant them in a way, and it's really just like a revenge story for Dracula as he's working his way through it. So there were some spots of it that were a bit slow, kind of muddled, wondering where they're going to go with it. Christopher Lee doesn't really show up at all, besides seeing like a quick, replay of how he died at the end of the last film. It's about 45 minutes before he even shows up again, and even then there's not a whole lot of him until toward the end. I feel like he pops up here and there, but I think, as I probably mentioned in another film, is that I've gotten kind of spoiled. I just want to see him right away to see how he does with it. But another thing that I kind of noticed about this was it was a bit more risque, the fact that they're actually at this brothel and everything. It's a bit darker, too, just the fact that they even have a satanic temple in a movie like this. It really feels like they were making some changes with the film as they were getting into the 70s. So it did have a bit of a different feel, but, and ultimately Dracula gets defeated, and he's rotting again in his dust, and it'll be interesting to see how they bring him back the next time. But, it was an okay film. It wasn't great. It's definitely worth checking out, though, if you're interested in Christopher Lee Dracula stuff to kind of see where it goes. I think it flowed all right. It had its hiccups here and there, but overall, I'd say it was just an okay movie, worth checking out, but not one going out of my way for. But with all that, that's really, unfortunately, about all that I have to say about this one, and this is why I think what I'm going to do going forward, I mentioned this earlier, was doing several of these films for one video, because sometimes there's not as much to talk about because they're following some formulas that we like. There's not too many changes. So all those differences here and there aren't really enough to fill up a whole video. We're only at about 5 minutes even on this one. But anyways, I am going to continue to make some more of these. I got a few more in this set before moving on to some of the Frankenstein stuff and some of the other films that they have to offer. And of course, I still have some of the old Universal films that I want to revisit some of those, or visit some of those for the first time in so long. It feels like the first time. So with that, thanks for coming by. Be sure to listen to all that YouTube stuff and subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notification for when I put up the next video, which, since this is a short one, I'm hoping to have another one up in another day or two. But anyways, thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another video. For those new here, I like to make these little videos about things I enjoy and want to share, usually about film and usually about either horror or 80s, but not always. Also, while you're here, please stick around to the end. And, if you like this video, please feel free to, subscribe. Maybe give it a thumbs up, hit that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though occasionally I work in a third. While you're here, also, check out my back catalog and share both this video and this channel around, as it really does help out quite a bit. Okay, now that all that's out of the way, if you've been coming across, any of my videos on this that I previously made, that I had visited 20 Hammer films earlier this year, and now I've been working my way through the different Dracula titles that they produced specifically. So for this video, I'm having some quick words about two of their films. First one is Scars of Dracula from 1970, and the second one is Dracula A.D. 1972 from 1972. So first off, when it comes to Scars of Dracula from 1970, it feels like these productions are getting a bit tired. Dracula's brought back by a bat that bled on his remains, a nice big rubber flapping bat. We're finally getting to that point where we're seeing some of that cheesiness that was sometimes made fun of in other movies. With this, we also get, another story of a traveler coming across a castle, getting caught up in Dracula's affairs, and Dracula needing to be defeated. So there really isn't too much to say about this, honestly. The gore has been upped a little bit. We even have a little bit of brief nudity in this one. But yeah, and Christopher Lee seems kind of rare, and I don't know, his performance comes across as borderline disinterested in a way. I feel like at this point, the Dracula property has been being treated kind of like a TV show where each one's almost like its own episode. But this feels like a TV show that's in its 5th season, trying to find a way to justify still making episode after episode. Nothing new or changing things up, which brings me to Dracula A.D. 1972 from 1972, of course. This one they really took a swing at, though. They got out of the 1800s and brought this to 1972. So it opens up with seeing a defeat of Dracula by the hands of Van Helsing, played again by Peter Cushing, which is great to see him back. But some of Dracula's remains are recovered and kind of hidden away, and now 100 years later, Van Helsing's great-granddaughter is hanging out with this group of misfits, this mix of kind of like beatniks meet hippies in a way, would be probably the best way I could describe them. And as in Taste the Blood of Dracula, they're looking for something new and fun to do. So they get roped into doing this black mass where Dracula's brought back to life in a very similar way that he was in the previous film that they brought him back, similar way with their black mass. But so now Van Helsing's grandson, who's played by Peter Cushing as well, now he needs to kind of assist in defeating Dracula, as the police are investigating the situation that went down. By far, this is the strangest of all of the films, and the strangest thing about it is that it's quite jarring how we went from such a sudden switch from the 1800s over to the 70s. The entire look and feel of the film is very, very different, and the soundtrack is very kind of like a stereotypical 70s film in a way. Many of the scenes, it was interesting here, but it's also very distracting having that kind of sound. Though we do get a bit of a lull in this one, maybe there's like 10 or 15 minutes where things kind of stumble and lose their footing a bit. It all kind of works out in the end and was an interesting entry in the series. As I feel the producers kind of recognized that they needed to do some big update for their latest installment to get people to come out to see it again. I believe it had been 2 years since their previous film. And so they needed to bring it up to what was, at the time, current times. Some of it works, and some of that borderline 70s porno sounding soundtrack doesn't. But between Scars of Dracula and Dracula A.D. 1972, Dracula A.D. 1972 is the one most worth checking out from these two. And, speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this little video about those and sticking around to the end. I have two more movies to visit in the series, which are the Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973 and The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires from 1974. So be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell icon there to get notifications for when I put up that new content, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to my latest video. For those who are new here, I make these little videos about things that I like and want to enjoy, usually about film, and most often it's about horror or something old from the 80s that I want to revisit. But before we dive in any further, if you're new here and you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon down in the corner to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though occasionally I work in something else. And be sure to check out my back catalog, stick around to the end, and share both this video and channel around, as it really helps out quite a bit. Now, this is another quick one here, because this was the, well, let me just start for those who are new. I've been visiting some of these Hammer films since the beginning of 2022, and once I got through a big set, I decided to start visiting all of these Dracula films starring Christopher Lee that I'd never seen before. So I've been kind of working my way through that whole series here, and now I'm on to basically the final Hammer Dracula film that Christopher Lee did, which is the Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973, which stars not only Christopher Lee, but we also get Peter Cushing coming back as Van Helsing, or technically a descendant of Van Helsing. And yeah, so Christopher Lee did do one more Dracula performance after this in a film called Dracula and Son, but from what I've read about that film, I'll be avoiding it like a bloodborne plague. It's supposedly pretty horrible and even hard to track down. But as far as this film, The Satanic Rites of Dracula, the synopsis for this one is as follows. In the 1970s, Scotland Yard believed it had uncovered a case of vampirism. They call in veteran vampire researcher Professor Lorimer Van Helsing, a descendant of Dr. Abraham Van Helsing. So that is basically the feel for this one in a nutshell, you know, the Scotland Yard investigation on, you know, for this case of vampirism. And they need to enlist Van Helsing for help, as he is kind of just considered to be an expert on the occult. And it was interesting having this one final Christopher Lee performance to check out, and luckily, you know, it was pretty good. Particularly the scenes with him and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, you know, them going face to face, toe to toe on some of this, really came across well. I will say I'm kind of hard pressed to really review and look into which performance of Christopher Lee's would be my favorite in this set, because it would likely coincide with what would end up being my favorite film in the set, and I still have one more to go through, which is A Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. So I think I'm going to hold off on any final words until I get to that one. But I will say that this one was a really interesting one to check out. It's definitely more modern compared to the others, of course. My only complaints would be that, like in the others, the soundtrack is kind of rough. I just don't like the kind of soundtrack that they put for it. Also, the quality was very low. It may just have been the addition of what I'd watched, but it seemed very washed out and kind of grainy in a way. I feel like older films created using different filming techniques, maybe different film stock, even from the 50s and 60s, some of those just seem to have aged better over time somehow. Maybe it's because it's set in a different setting that we don't really have that same connection to what we're more familiar with if they're in the 1800s in Romania or something, versus something in the 1970s can look more modern, and it just kind of, we could tell a little bit more that something isn't looking right. But it really wasn't enough to distract from the movie in any way. I mean, it was still pretty good, and you know, it's still a fun one to check out, you know, especially, you know, this one definitely had a bit more blood compared to the others. It even had some nudity in it that gave it an R rating. It seemed a little bit more violent in some ways. But they definitely, I feel like they definitely stepped things up a bit, as, you know, we're going through this story, seeing these satanic rites, these ceremonies that are happening, seeing Scotland Yard catch on to something's happening, and that some pretty high-ranking political officials are involved as well, and calling in Van Helsing, where it felt almost like a, you know, more like an investigation than a horror movie for a while. But as they get deeper into it and Dracula's kind of uncovered and is confronted about this, it launches closer into that feel of the older Hammer films. And there's a lot of fun to check out. I feel like they kind of took the good things from the older stuff in the 50s and 60s and the good stuff from Dracula A.D. and tried to like mix those together in a way that worked a bit better in this film than the way that Dracula A.D. felt a little bit distracting, like all that sudden change to the storylines and the settings of everything. But it was still a lot of fun, worth checking out. And like I said, I got one more left in that set for the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. So be sure to like and subscribe and hit that little bell icon to get notifications for when that one comes up. And yeah, and then I'll be moving on to some other ones like Frankenstein or some of their one-offs. But anyways, thanks for sticking around for this admittedly very quick video, but I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my latest video. For those who are new, I like to make these videos about things I enjoy and want to share, usually about film, and lately it's been a lot of horror and 80s throwbacks. While you're here, please stick around to the end of the video and consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon in the corner so you get notifications for when I put up new content, which is once or twice a week. Check out my back catalog and share both this channel and this video around, as it really does help out a lot. Okay, now that all that's out of the way, if you've been coming across my videos on this, previously I've visited over, 20 Hammer films earlier this year meaning 2022, depending on when you're watching this video. And so now I've been kind of working my way through all of the Dracula titles. So for this video, I'm going to have some quick words about the 1974 film, The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. So I was led to believe that this was the final of the Dracula the Hammer Dracula related films, but there is another one in my collection that I accidentally skipped over, which is Countess Dracula from a few years earlier in 1971, which I'm going to push that one to the next video, so that way I can still release this one this week, and I will do a video for that with a wrap up about their Dracula and vampire films in general. So anyways, for The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, the synopsis for this film is as follows. Count Dracula journeys to a remote Chinese village in the guise of a warlord to support 6 vampires who are dispirited after the loss of a 7th member of their cult. At the same time, vampire hunter Professor Van Helsing happens to be lecturing in the country and is persuaded by villagers to help them fight, this curse of the ages. So first off, no Lee. Yeah, no Christopher Lee in this one. He was done in the one before it, which took place in the 70s. So this time Dracula is played by John Forbes Robertson. Now he's only in the beginning as they're kind of setting things up, and then towards the finale, but it would have been nice to see Christopher Lee in this one. However, we still get Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, which is great. So that's a definite plus, especially because at the time of this film, or by the time I watched this film, I'd seen him from films in the late 50s all the way through this one, which is a 1974, so it brings him much closer to the Cushing that I grew up with, which is mainly just Star Wars, playing Grand Moff Tarkin and a quick little scene or two in Top Secret, the Val Kilmer film. So it was, he's a great actor. I loved him in Cash on Demand was another one that was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing some more of the Frankenstein work. But this film also was a bit of another leap for Hammer, where they were trying to take it in a different direction, but they didn't leap too far, and what I mean by that is that it still has, that feel and that look of the earlier Hammer films, that same kind of film stock and filming techniques, specifically that look really stuck out to me because there's something that I always enjoyed, and if you watched all those previous videos of mine, you've probably heard me mention it several times, what I like about how it looks. But also we get this other, switch up that it's actually taking place in China, this time with real Asian actors throughout it, playing Chinese people. Imagine that. No latex or makeup making that epicanthic fold, which you also had to look up what the epicanthic fold means, what it's called when the eyes are kind of shaped that way, because it was very distracting and just weird, not to mention insensitive, when I saw them do that in The Terror of the Tongs, which I will link to that review in here as well, where I saw Christopher Lee with that makeup on his face to try to make him look like Fu Manchu. That wasn't good. Anyways, so there is also a small connection to the Tongs in this, and mention, but ultimately this felt like they took the best of the earlier Hammer Dracula films and mixed it with like 70s Kung Fu. So everything about it felt much more expansive, larger than the previous films. There was more special effects, more nudity, more violence. It didn't feel as closed in as some of the other films did. And it just felt like in general in the story there was much more of a journey kind of happening that really made this one worth checking out. It was a bit creepier. We had these more zombie-like creatures throughout. You know, they pushed aside the more alluring and hypnotic vampires of some of the other films in favor of leaning into more of a ghoul-like aspect of them, which I think really worked well. It all worked well. And since it made those, leaps, I never felt like it was retreading the same ground either. Like when you see certain films, they always try to do a new installment, but it's pretty much the same story with just something else wrapped on top. This one felt a bit more fresh, and it was definitely worth checking out. And those leaps and not retreading, it worked so well that, the first 25 minutes of this hour-and-a-half film just flew by. Honestly, the only issue that I have was just the absence of Christopher Lee. Even though it would have only been those few scenes, it would have been nice to have this film be the send-off of him playing Dracula instead of the last one that took place in '73. But hey, at least we got Peter Cushing in it, so that was always great, made it worth checking out. And I could definitely see checking this one out again, because this one really was quite a pleasant surprise. Because as I've been going through these films and seeing them try different things, there was definitely a sense of diminishing quality throughout these. And so for this one, my expectation was extremely low, but it ended up being this really fun surprise. It's a fun mashup of the Hammer Dracula that I was familiar with, as well as some kung fu sprinkled all throughout it. So we had these great fight scenes and a lot more going on. It's definitely worth checking out, and I'll definitely be checking it out again one day. And speaking of checking out, so one thanks for checking out this other quick video of mine. Check those links in the description, and I'm going to put them up in the boxes here of a couple of other videos for you to check out. Also hit that subscribe button and little bell icon there to get notifications when I put up new content, because the next one, within the next week or two, I'm going to put up that one for Countess Dracula when I check that one out, and put a little bit of a wrap up about what I felt about these Hammer Dracula films in general. So you hit that little notification, a little bell icon, you'll know when those videos are up. Anyways, thanks for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back to the final video from my visiting, for the first time, all these Hammer films that were based around Dracula. But before we begin, if you're new and enjoy this video, please consider subscribing and, give me a thumbs up, maybe hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week. Check out my back catalog while you're here. Stick around to the end, and if you could go ahead and share both this video and channel around, as it really does help out quite a bit. Okay, anyways, as I speed through this first part of it, I was going off of a Wikipedia article, which was outlining the 9 Dracula-related Hammer films. But as I was finishing off The Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires in the previous week, I discovered that I had another film, one which was not mentioned in the article. It's weird that Wikipedia wouldn't be accurate. I'm sure there's some other reasons why it wasn't on there, I just haven't looked into it. But anyways, the other film was Countess Dracula from 1971, so I wanted to check that one out before kind of giving my final words on the Hammer Dracula films. So, obviously I'm a little bit out of order here because I had already caught up to 1974 with Legend of the 7 Golden Vampires, and this one's from 1971. But anyways, the synopsis for this one is as follows. In 17th century Hungary, elderly widow Countess Elizabeth Nadasdy maintains her misleading youthful appearance by bathing in the blood of virgins regularly supplied to her by her faithful servant, Captain Dobby. Not Dobby, that's a little elf from another series of films. Anyways, I'm just gonna have some quick words on this one because, first off, it's based off the tales of Elizabeth Bathory, who was reported and recounted to have basically murdered tons of virgins and bathed in their blood in an attempt to retain her youth. And it's a very old vampire story that I remember reading into like way back and was very interested in it. So of course, going right into this film, I was right on board with it for that initial first 20 minutes, I would say. It really had pulled me in, but slowly as this film unravels, it also unraveled itself. It kind of lost me. I'm not sure exactly why, but the pace was really off, and I just couldn't really stay interested. Throw on top of that being so loosely connected to Hammer versus the other films in the Wikipedia entry. I had a hard time kind of getting through this one. I didn't have any of the same actors in it. And ultimately I wouldn't really recommend it, especially since there are some much better vampire films, within, the Hammer library to check out, and, that are more worth that 90 minutes of your time. But as for which ones, as I move on to kind of like my little wrap up of checking out what ended up being 10 of these films in general, my overall thoughts on those 10 films that I've seen, which, it actually dawned on me that we're in September now and I've watched 30 Hammer films this year since January. It's just crazy. It's quite a bit considering that we're kind of living in the golden age of content these days with so much to choose from. I frequently kind of hit this bout of like choice paralysis where I end up falling back on YouTube videos, people falling down, cats losing their cool by being given a bath or something. But anyways, the films that I visited were Dracula, also known as The Horror of Dracula from 1958, which we had Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. After that, I did The Brides of Dracula from 1960. We had no Christopher Lee in this one, since it's, about the brides, but Peter Cushing returned. And we had Dracula Prince of Darkness from 1966, which we had Christopher Lee, but no Cushing that time. Dracula's Risen from the Grave from 1968, also with Lee, but no Cushing. Taste the Blood of Dracula from 1970, again Lee, but no Cushing. Scars of Dracula from 1970 as well, and the same, we had Lee, but no Cushing. And then we had Dracula A.D. 1972 from 1972. And we had Lee and Cushing in this one, and it kind of updated it, so Cushing was like a descendant of Van Helsing. And then of course we had Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973, where we get Lee and Cushing back together again, in kind of like this updated story in the 70s as well. It was a really good kind of send-off, I feel like, for those characters. And then we had The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires from 1974. Of course, this one we got John Forbes Robertson as Dracula, as well as David de Keyser, who was kind of like Dracula, was inhabiting his body in this. Yeah, we also got Cushing in that one as Van Helsing, which is great. It kind of set it further back in time as well, so it was before the stuff from the films that took place in the 70s. And I feel like they did a good job. Definitely check out my previous video on that one. And but yeah, actually, check out all the previous videos that I did, not just because I wanted to watch them, but because that's where I kind of go into much more detail about all those films. I may have missed one in there, but with all that said, I would have to say that the ones that really stick out to me, that I feel are worth checking out, after kind of thinking back on these over the last, I believe it's been about 10 weeks or so, was Dracula / The Horror of Dracula, of course. That was our introduction to having Christopher Lee from 1958. It was great. Same thing with Dracula Prince of Darkness, the follow-up from 1966. The Satanic Rites of Dracula, I think that might have been one that yeah, Satanic Rites of Dracula from 1973, that was a really good one as well. And especially the one that I really was not expecting to enjoy, but ended up really enjoying, was The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires from 1974. So 4 out of 10 is what I ended up enjoying ultimately, which isn't bad considering the time that these films were made, how quickly they were trying to crank them out. And they obviously had some issues along the way trying to decide what to do with the franchise to kind of keep it fresh and throw in some changes. In some cases it worked, in some cases it didn't. And in the cases where they didn't really make any of those updates, some of them just felt like more of the same old, where Christopher Lee was getting a bit bored with it. But at least out of those 10, they were all kind of interesting to check out for one reason or another, and I did get a solid 4 films out of there that I would definitely go back and watch again. But that's about it for this, little kind of wrap up on those, and if interested, I'd recommend at least checking out those 4 if you have access to them. And I think you may, like me, enjoy checking those out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this video and sticking around, not just to the end, but throughout this entire series. If you've been watching these from the beginning, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell, share all that stuff, because I'm still working my way through some other horror revisits like I did with Friday the 13th. I'm currently working on the franchise for Nightmare on Elm Street before going into some remakes, and then some other franchises, that ones that either I haven't seen in a long time or some that I just never kept up with, similar to what I did about a year ago when I went through the Halloween films, because there were so many of them that I hadn't seen over the years. But I'll also be putting in some one-offs, you know. Speaking of which, I'll probably go every now and then an older Universal film that I either haven't seen in a long time or I'd never seen. And as well as some more Hammer films. I got some Frankenstein ones, some Mummy ones, and a bunch of one-offs from Hammer. I don't know if I'll be doing a video for every single one of those, but I might do a video that compiles a few of them, or just do a video for the ones that really stick out as worth checking out. But anyways, that's it for now. Another little quick video here this week. Thanks for coming by, and I will see you in the next one.